Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Touchline Table Talk. We are back ready in the home stretch of club football season. Martino and Matt Santangelo alongside you guys. If you have not already, please like, subscribe to the channel, give us a 5-star rating on all your audio platforms where you consume podcasts. Matt, let's get right into it. Champions League semifinals, leg 2 for both. We'll start off on the first match. Arsenal make their first Champions League final since 2006. It has been a roller coaster past couple of months for them. We'll start with the Premier League over the weekend and how they come away with a massive victory, Bukayo Saka stepping up. And then on Monday, Everton come away with a huge result to help Arsenal get back into the forefront of winning the Premier League. Doku had a very, very late goal, so it could have been even another point for Arsenal. But the main thing was they took care of business, and now the pressure shifted back to Manchester City. And so after that, we come in. This was a back and forth sort of match. I think Arsenal might have gotten away with a couple of, dicey calls, I guess you could say it. Many people think that Saliba committed a penalty. Same goes for Gabriel. I think there were like two different instances. They come away with the 1-0 victory with a goal just before the first half ended from Bukayo Saka. Diego Simeone had kind of a laugher in the second half with his substitutes. So last time we saw Antoine Griezmann in the Champions League because he's going to Orlando City. Matt, Arsenal make their first Champions League final since 2006. Can they pull it off and win their first ever?
They're going to have to bring their A game. And I'm not saying they haven't brought their A game this entire Champions League campaign. Credit to them. They've really been able to drill down in the finer details, at least on the defensive side. We know they're a pretty balanced team. We know they have guys that can go forward and make the difference there. But defensively is where the focus lies, and I think shifts, because Gabriel and Saliba have been sensational the entire season. And this is a team that has been difficult to unlock in this entire campaign. But they're coming up against a team that, if there's any one that can unlock them, it's PSG,
which we'll get into.
But yeah, like when it comes to Arsenal making it to the Champions League final, as you mentioned, for the first time since 2006, this is a monumental moment for them. This is a massive opportunity, right? And especially for, a homegrown player like Bukayo Saka to get that moment, right? This is a player that had the missed penalty in the Euro, a player that has kind of had to overcome and grow, in the midst of this entire project building by Mikel Arteta. And it's been a difficult season. We've touched on that. But for him to have that moment and carry that momentum into a Champions League final, I think is massive for him. And I think for, obviously, Arsenal as a collective.
Yeah, Arsenal were the better side of the two legs. I don't think it was drastically better. I think they were very fortunate they were very fortunate not to have a penalty called against them in this one. That could have gone either way for sure. There was like angles and where Simeone should have had a much better touch to score that goal. But again, this comes down to Diego Simeone, and just to track back to Atletico Madrid here, making the poor substitutions towards the end of the match where they're more defensive than they are offensive, where you're trying to get a goal, where you're trying to get back into things, at least force extra time. You have a fantastic goalkeeper, maybe get to penalties, give yourself an opportunity. And this is why Atletico Madrid fans have been tortured for years and years and years, because when they get to the moment, it becomes too big for them. For Arsenal, this was no different. I thought they had plenty of opportunities. It's funny how Victor Gyökeres and Bukayo Saka have both started to kind of catch on fire in the final weeks of this season. Saka has been dealing with injuries. He's been dealing with a lack of scoring. Gyökeres has struggled adapting to the Premier League, but his build-up play here was much improved. Arsenal absolutely have deserved this. I think that their shakiness down the stretch here has kind of led some people astray into thinking that they aren't this great team that some people might think they are. I still think that they're missing a couple of pieces to put them over the top. But finally, when Saka steps up and scores the biggest goals of his career, then I think this is giving him all the confidence in the world. His post-match interview as well, where he was kind of alluding to that they wanted to face a particular team, but he's not going to say which one it was. To me, that's a confident player at the right time, because when you look at Arsenal and you get their vibes, you can always rely upon the manager to a degree. But one of those players has to step up in the moment and say, I am taking the bull by the horns. I'm going to lead us in this direction, and we're going to win a major trophy, something that's not the FA Cup or Community Shield or Carabao Cup, for the first time in a very long time. We're talking about 22 years since their last Premier League title. Never have won a Champions League title and just got to the Champions League final for the first time in 2 decades. They might do it, despite all the turbulence down the stretch here. Any final comments on Arsenal?
I think it speaks to the unity and the growing that this team has endured the entire season under Mikel Arteta, right? They've went through the ebbs and flows of a long season, a lot of matches, right? You go through hot patches where you're flying. You feel like you're going to win every single trophy available to you, right? And then they've had a couple slip ups where you're like, they can't blow that game. They can't do this. They can't do that. Obviously, City were breathing down their necks, right? But when you look at the way they've been able to navigate this entire season and face the pressure head on like they have, they're in a position where they could potentially win the two biggest, best trophies available to them in the Premier League and the Champions League. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to who's the one leading the charge here, right? Mikel Arteta. Amidst all the noise surrounding him, right? Can he get over the hump? Can he actually win something with this group, right? It's been a while. People were calling and questioning Mikel Arteta's job and saying, if he doesn't win this year, will he ever do it? And do we need to potentially consider our options? I think it's pretty clear what the direction is going forward, and that is with Mikel Arteta at the wheel.
Yeah, I think him making the Champions League final also bought him
Huge.
a massive amount of time. Not
Yeah.
to mention, obviously, losing the 2 domestic cups that they were like overwhelmingly favorites to do so.
Mhm.
So I think them slipping up there and obviously losing to Manchester City in one of those, like, just reiterated this idea and narrative that they aren't ready for this, that City are still the team to beat in England. Right now, Arsenal in the driver's seat for their fate. We'll see what happens. On the other side of things, just yesterday, PSG, immediate impact within the first 5 minutes away to Bayern. And again, this was really the only biggest action of the goal scored. Again, we know that Harry Kane ends up scoring towards stoppage time. It ends up going 1-1, but PSG were firmly in control of this, had many opportunities. I thought Neuer was great yesterday for them, but PSG just firing on all cylinders. This is what we talked about last week. I think that they could play two different types of matches. They can go on the full frontal and assault you and score so many goals, and then they can put in a defensive performance like this where they're not even conceding anything until the very last minute, and where Bayern had to, where they were unrelenting with pressure. Luis Enrique, what they've been able to do to potentially become the second team in the 21st century to go back-to-back Champions League winners, is everything that I guess PSG have dreamed of ever since this project launched in the early 2010s. They're at the summit of football right now. Their options are incredible. Kvara playing at this level, I understand the angle of people sitting there saying, yeah, well, he's not playing like every single week in the league, like getting all these minutes and stuff, but he's still the first ever player to score in 7 consecutive, and we're going to talk about him more, 7 consecutive knockout matches with the goal contributions. It's honestly indisputable to argue with what he's doing at this moment in time. He is the most informed player, one of the most informed players in the world. PSG are going to make history. Are they going to go back-to-back Champions League winners?
I think they are. And, I know I waxed poetic, and you did too, regarding Arsenal, what they've been able to accomplish getting here, right? But I look at the way this PSG team has been built out post Mbappe, Messi, Neymar. You look at how balanced it is, top to bottom. You touched on it, right? How they can beat you in a bevy of different ways, right? Let's go back to the first leg against Bayern. That's a shootout. Goals back and forth, chances created all over the place. And what did we say? We said, one of these teams is going to have to show us they can defend, and because you can't play this over 2 legs. Someone's got to be able to put their foot down and defend.
Yeah.
And let's see if someone can show that side of their game. We've seen the offensive firepower. Luis Diaz, Olise, Kane, like Ballon d'Or contenders all over. Who can batten the hatches, defend, and get to the Champions League final? And you saw it with PSG, right? I know Harry Kane scored a late goal,
Right.
but you look at the way that PSG were able to show their maturity, show the world the fact that, hey, we're defending champions for a reason. We're not just a one-trick pony that's going to put guys forward and score goals and beat you with a bombardment of chances. We can defend. We have Marquinhos has been there for a long period of time. You have a great coach. You have a really balanced midfield. João Neves, Vitinha, all the names we all
It's the best
know.
in the world, yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to the way this PSG team has been constructed, post those players I just mentioned, I think, again, it speaks to the riches they have and the luxuries they have. Yes. It also speaks to the fact that their domestic league isn't as strong as some of the other major leagues, but that's worked to their benefit,
The
right?
same goes to Bayern.
You can't victimize or blame a team for saying, hey, we're just too dominant. Now we can strategize. Now we can say, hey, Kvara, let's give you a breather here because we need you at 100% for the crucial games. And I think that this is what you're seeing. This is a byproduct of PSG's dominance and the way they've been able to go about business in building a winner that could potentially defend the Champions League trophy.
Yeah, again, Barcola, Due, and then Kvaratskhelia. So, like, what else you got there? And then they're not even the best player. It's still
I haven't even
Dembele.
mentioned Dembele.
I think Dembele is the best player still. He's the one week in, week out doing that, less breaks, less rotations as opposed to the other players. Like Kvara's campaign in the Champions League has completely changed the perception of his season. It's not even his great league campaign. His league campaign's absolutely mediocre if you look at everything. It's not saying like he's awful, but in terms of output and production, it's nowhere near the level that he's playing in the Champions League. That has a lot to do with rotation, the style of what the Champions League can bring, obviously facing opponents like Bayern. It's a totally different environment. And this is why I'm not necessarily surprised by this, but the amount of space that he's like afforded yesterday on counterattacks and just he manipulates the ball so well. It's like glued to his feet. We've seen it at Napoli. And then again, this is like the not your typical PSG investment where they're going like over 200 million for an Mbappe, a Neymar. They got him for 70 something million. From Napoli. It's one of the better deals, especially when you compare to a lot of other signings today in world football and Europe as a whole. They understand squad building. And they put their players in an environment in which they could thrive. It's similar to where Manchester City were just a few years ago. Like, sure, can they drop the bank on a player whenever they want and spend an insane amount of money on the salary and so on and so forth? Yes, they can. But the smarter projects that they're doing at this moment in time are purchasing players for 30, 40 million, or even, the Kvara exceptions for 70 million, and then boosting them. I saw someone put up a graphic today comparing the cost of Juve's midfield to PSG's midfield when Juve had Locatelli, Douglas Luiz, and then Coop Miners. They spent more money, Juve, than what PSG had spent on their midfield. And it's night and days, light years ahead, different, better. Okay. And that right there is the shift in PSG's project. It's not that they're reliant on money anymore. It's that they use money as a tool to build one of the best teams that we've seen in the modern era because they're rapidly approaching that. I don't care about the league stuff. Like, it's obviously going is much weaker compared to the other top leagues, but it's about the Champions League, and they're getting there on a consistent basis, making deep runs. Mind you, they almost made it against Borussia Dortmund as well. So it could have been like 3 finals in 4 years. This is a great team. I think they have a great opportunity to be only the second team in the 21st century to go back-to-back in the Champions League as winners. This is, I think, in my opinion, Matt, the better matchup for PSG. I think Arsenal rather have faced Bayern. I think that's who Saka was alluding to. I don't have any proof of that. That's just my instinct because I think there's just the matchup makes more sense for them. So yeah, PSG making the final. Let's just like shift a little bit to Kvara. This is our third topic of the day. Now you start to hear towards the end of the domestic season all these potential, Ballon d'Or candidates and winners. Kvaratskhelia is obviously Georgian. He is sensational in the Champions League. I think he's been the best player in the Champions League this year. Ballon d'Or is still a bit too premature for me to say, especially with the World Cup looming. We don't know if they're going to win this final. I think he's had a weak domestic campaign that might hurt him a little bit in this, or at least keep it open. But do you think Kvara is your Ballon d'Or winner as of today?
For as great as he has been in the big moments when the lights are brightest, I don't think he's the Ballon d'Or winner. I don't think he's going to be in that conversation. I think, you look at the numbers that are posted and produced by players we've seen over these last 2 fixtures, right? Between PSG and Bayern, and also you could even go towards some of the other teams in this competition. Harry Kane's putting up 50 plus goals, like ease, making a semifinal run. The way he plays the game, the fact that England have a really good chance at making a deep run in the World Cup and potentially even winning it, depending on who you ask.
Right.
And then you look at all the other players around them. I think there's not enough in the domestic campaign from Kvara to surpass what those other players are doing. Now, it can change if right? Because we touched on this. A lot of times these awards are given out or they're decided if it's very close between who shows up in those big moments, who is the one that decides the Champions League final, the World Cup semifinal, World Cup final, or a Euro, right? If Kvara goes into the Champions League final and continues his dominance, creating chances, scoring goals, maybe he wins the match for PSG, I think the conversation will be elevated and it'll get a little bit more steam. But as things stand right now, I think for as good as he has been and for as complete as he has been as a winger, arguably the best in Europe right now, the way he's playing in crucial matches, I don't think that he surpassed some of the other players that we've been touching upon this podcast, like the Olise's,
Right.
Harry Kane's, and some of those players.
I think Dembele and Lamine Yamal have potentially bigger and greater impacts when it comes to the World Cup. And I still think the World Cup, when it comes to the Ballon d'Or, matters because we saw Erling Haaland objectively have a much better club season than what Leo Messi did. And Messi's club season was, I believe, taken for granted, to be quite honest with you, that year, where he's dropping 20 and 20 in Ligue 1, where he's getting tons of assists and is scoring goals, but not at the highest of rates. They flopped in the Champions League, which significantly hurt him, but he puts in a sensational World Cup performance, whereas Haaland, obviously playing for Norway, kind of gets punished for being born in a country that isn't prolific in terms of footballing prowess. So I think the same applies for Kvara with Georgia. And again, his domestic season is not as great as some people would like to have for a Ballon d'Or winner. I still think his teammate Dembele has a better case for the Ballon d'Or. And then again, because they could go back-to-back trebles. And then he plays for the best team in the world with France on the international level. Like, they're still the most talented. He puts in a great World Cup. Dembele's in the driver's seat again to go back-to-back Ballon d'Ors. It's just, and then the same goes for Lamine Yamal. They can win La Liga this weekend if they end up doing that. And I know, like, obviously he has the injury, so hopefully he's going to have a tournament worthy with the World Cup. So there still is that possibility. Harry Kane now, he's going to have to win the World Cup to win the Ballon d'Or. He's got to be the best player in the tournament. That's his only pathway. Bayern not even making the Champions League. Again, brackets are brackets. Arguably could have beaten Atletico or Arsenal if they met them over two legs. Certainly could have been a possibility, but the reality is they're out in the semifinal. They don't make the final. So with that, I think it's a little bit up in the air. Kvara, I think, has the best narrative going for him at the current moment in time because of what he's done in the knockout stages in the Champions League. And that's been the best player, and it's kind of indisputable. It's just during a World Cup year, and there's still a final to be played. So we'll see what ends up happening. I think ultimately Dembele is going to go back-to-back. If PSG win that Champions League and France make a deep run, I don't see anyone beating them, potentially Yamal. So sticking to La Liga, Matt, and this is our final topic of the day. This is the craziest one by far. I'm not sure how many people have seen all of this drama that is coming out of Real Madrid. Matt, I'm going to read off a list of the situations and reports that have gone down the past few weeks within Real Madrid. Ready? Antonio Rudiger has slapped Alvaro Carreras. He is one of the assistant coaches within the squad. A few weeks later, Rudiger was screaming at Carreras to the point that the team had to force Rudiger to apologize. Carreras confirmed the incident through a story on Instagram. Then Tchouaméni and Valverde got into a fight 2 days in a row. Valverde got hit so hard, supposedly, by Tchouaméni that he had to go to the hospital. Then Kylian Mbappe gets into a verbal fight with one of the members of the coaching staff. Real Madrid have reduced tactical workouts in training, and then there's supposedly a leak coming from inside the dressing room. And last but not least, multiple players in the dressing room are not happy with each other's efforts. And Real Madrid might lose La Liga to Barcelona this weekend. It is not sunshine and rainbows in Real Madrid training. We didn't even talk about how Mbappe went to Italy and how they were a little upset about that. We're not even talking about how Florentino Perez is supposedly meeting with Jose Mourinho in talks about coming back to Real Madrid, despite the fact that many things that I left out myself is how he handled the Vinicius Jr. racist incident where he was defending a situation in a player and where Vinny was potentially abused, and Mourinho didn't come to denounce that immediately. And that to me is another problem where you want to bring that into a dressing room that of Real Madrid that's already fractured. And to my point last week, Matt, Florentino Perez is on the outs as president right now. This is a very unstable environment. Professionals like Antonio Rudiger and Tchouaméni need to conduct themselves properly. I think we could see a potential mass exodus of players at Real Madrid this summer. And yes, I didn't even get to mention how the petition to get Kylian Mbappe out of Real Madrid has reached record numbers. Again, anybody can sign up and sign a petition. I don't think that's directly reflective of the Real Madrid supporter fan base. But my goodness, trouble in paradise, Santangelo. What do you make of all this Real Madrid drama?
A lot to unpack there, right?
Yes.
It's been
There's more.
There's a laundry list. If you guys wanted to check it out, you guys can easily search it, right? It's such a hot topic in football. What this chaotic, turbulence, disastrous season for Real Madrid has shown me, or has told me, is that Xabi Alonso has been vindicated, because he left and everyone might have said, oh, okay, maybe he ain't ready for the big boys, right? Coaching a club like Real Madrid, where there's a bunch of egos, big personalities, right? There's authoritative figures that have a lot of pull, a lot of say, right? You mentioned Kylian Mbappe. That's always been a big topic of conversation. Now, when you get a player like that, of that stature, and you have other big players in that team as well, that sometimes they can kind of overthrow a coach, and they have more power than the coach, and that's where a lot of friction gets caused. I think what we've seen this entire season really kind of speaks to what Xabi Alonso had to deal with, and how difficult his job was made as a result of the things happening within this changing room. But I also think, on the same token, I think it also speaks to the difficulties of coaching at a club like Real Madrid, or at rival big clubs, right? Where it's not just plug players of high class and top quality, and you're going to just get the standard output of trophies and success and all the things that come with it. It's almost like an episode or a series of Love Island. There's drama, there's fights, and these are professionals. These are grown men making millions and millions of dollars. And keeping that all together for an entire season is extremely difficult, and something that I think has really troubled Real Madrid since Carlo Ancelotti has left. And I think it just goes to show you that managers like Carlo Ancelotti, who are so revered and have so much success in the sport, they're great at managing the egos and keeping the group together. And through difficult seasons like they have, you need that. You can't just have an X's and O's and tactical mastermind. If they don't know how to deal with a player X here versus how they deal with the player here, then there's real trouble that can brew. So I think that's what I'm seeing from this Real Madrid team. And I'm curious to see what the end result of this coming into the summer is, right? Do we see drastic changes when it comes to player personnel, the coaching staff, top down? Or is it something where you see a coach and that kind of maybe can steady the ship and calm matters? But as things stand right now, Real Madrid are a complete disaster when it comes to all facets of football.
The solution is Jose Mourinho in 2026, really? Is this what we're doing? This is, again, the same thing that I talked about. This guy is toxic. When things go south, right, we know they're already playing poorly, and that was with good tactics from Xabi Alonso. Barca's on a different level. They're winning. Real Madrid are having all these internal struggles. So, like, say we just talk about, calming the dressing room, something that, like, Ancelotti was great at, the pragmatism of it all. Mourinho is not that anymore. Things go south, there isn't a worse person that you want going to press conferences than Jose Mourinho. He is going to pour more fuel onto the fire. He's not going to diffuse something. Ancelotti, why he's so great as a man manager, he's the greatest man manager that ever lived, in my opinion, because of this situation where he's showing more stability at Real Madrid in the twilight of his managerial career than a lot of guys are at the peak of their career. And again, Florentino Perez had brought this upon himself, where he allowed the players to get so much power and say in these situations that you show someone like Xabi Alonso the door. Arabeloa comes in. I mean, how many people can you genuinely bring in that could garner more respect than someone like Xabi Alonso? Like, truthfully, shown massive success as a manager, has won at Real Madrid, Spain, Liverpool, and we're
So maybe
going to finish.
Arbeloa. Arbeloa. I mean, you're talking.
Or below, yeah. But like,
You're talking about like Real Madrid
he was
lifers,
respectable.
almost lifers.
He was respectable, right? Like it's Xabi Alonso, truly one of the best midfielders of his generation.
Yeah.
So how many people are you going to actually bring in here that are going to get respect? If a great manager, like proven great manager and great player comes in and still can't get the respect of the players, what makes us think that at the end of the day, someone like Jose Mourinho comes in, diffuses the situation? I do not see how anyone can sit there and say that's the idea forward. The idea forward is to what you were alluding to, is a mass exodus of players. Guys like Rudiger are already going to see the door. We've heard rumors about Camavinga and Tchouaméni both potentially leaving. And if Tchouaméni is beating the shit out of Fede Valverde and putting him in a wheelchair and going to the hospital, then I think the decision is pretty easy there on who I'm getting rid of. And then on top of it, I just see and read about like who the true leader of Real Madrid is right now. And I don't think that there's a singular player there. And again, Luka Modric went out the door. That's another leader, right? Danny Carvajal, someone who's been a leader for many years, likely leaving the club as well. There is a lot of issues when it comes to chemistry at Real Madrid. And I'm not here to actually say this is like Kylian Mbappe's fault, because a lot of people want to do the common denominator thing.
Mhm.
Kylian Mbappe on the pitch is doing his job. There's many other Real Madrid players that when I watch them, I'm saying, you're not doing enough here. Kylian Mbappe having this, petition against him is one of the dumbest things. One, because it's not all Real Madrid fans that want him out. And two, like there isn't actually an immediate solution financially to getting rid of this player, even if you wanted to. There are like the only other club that could afford him or that would want him. There's two clubs. One would be Manchester City. The other would be the club that he just left in PSG.
Yeah.
So this isn't going to happen. They waited years for him. I think it's going to be a complete retooling at Real Madrid this coming summer. I don't think Florentino Perez should be the president much longer. I think he's overstayed his welcome in terms of decision making. It's time for someone else to come in, take the mantle, and push Madrid to a different direction, because it's all fine and well when you win those Champions League. There's a lack of consistency year in, year out with them, and there's a lack of stability. So I think this situation at Real Madrid cannot be fixed by just bringing in Jose Mourinho. It's new manager, new direction, new players, and just a restart with what's going on. Because right now, this core is rotten, and that list proves it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be multiple pieces of this current Real Madrid team that actually get shipped off this summer, because I don't think you can go through the season they had in the manner for which they did go through it and not see casualties of a broken project, right? And to your point, you're not going to move Kylian Mbappe because he is producing. This is a player, to your point, they also waited for, right? And he's doing everything he can. You can maybe not get the full picture based on what the media is saying regarding players' relationships with him, but I think there's no denying that when you see what he's producing on a regular basis, he's carrying his end of the deal. And I think it's easier, in my opinion, in this time for you to move on with some of those other pieces that maybe, are still quality players, but that it's rotten the core. It's rotten the core. And we're going to see a massive shift. It almost feels similar, and this is my final point.
Yeah.
It almost feels a little bit similar to what we saw in previous years at Real Madrid, right? Where they had quality, right? They're always going to have quality. They're always going to have Galactico players that make the difference on a given day. But for whatever reason, they're not jiving. They're not mending. And then there's going to have to be a shift. Okay, well, we got to get rid of 3 or 4 guys. Bring in different personalities. Guys are a little bit more, can keep the changing room, right? Balance to a team. We just mentioned it with PSG, right? Mbappe, Neymar, Messi, those are big personalities. They're commanding. They have massive say when it comes to player acquisition, how the team plays, all these sorts of factors. It's not always going to necessarily come down to player quality top to bottom. You need to create a group. You're with these guys. You're living with these players and these coaches for months on end. And you kind of see the stark contrast between the dynasty that's brewing and building with Paris Saint-Germain everything is flying. Everyone backs Luis Enrique. So much command and respect of that team. And then you see what's going on at Real Madrid. It's not all roses when you have bottomless pit of money, the Galactico shirt, the white shirt, the Blanco shirt, and all the players and riches that come with that. So it's going to be very fascinating to see what direction they go in the summer when it comes to coaches and potentially them blowing up what we see in this project right now.
Yeah, I think Florentino Perez is heading towards not a defining summer for him, but just one of his swan songs as he
Last
ends
dance.
his presidency as Real Madrid. Because I don't see it lasting much longer, but that's just me. So that pretty much encompasses everything that happened in the past couple of weeks here for Touchline Table Talk. I'm Martino Puccio. That's Matt Santangelo. You could follow us at Martino Pucci on Twitter, at Martino Puccio everywhere else. And you can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt_Santangelo, on Instagram at Matt_Santa22. And again, guys, please like, subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel here. We appreciate you all so much, and we will see you next time.